So we were looking at a concept in mathematics that we call simple interest. It's a very interesting, simple way of calculating what we call interest. So a simple interest, before we go into simple interest, let us look at a scenario so we can actually have a clear picture of what simple interest is. If you go to your mother, you borrow, say you borrow, let's say you go to the bank. Let's do a realistic example. Say you go to the bank and you borrow $1,000 from the bank, which, well, you would not probably borrow this from the bank. You probably borrow 20,000 or 100,000, or you borrow something greater than this. But we just want to use some simple numbers to actually get the concept. You borrow $1,000 from the bank, and the bank says, okay, since you're borrowing from the banks, you know that you will be paying more than $1,000 that you probably would take from the bank. So the bank says, okay, pay me 5% on this money, and so I'm giving you like 2 years to pay me back. So the bank says, okay, I'm giving you 2 years to pay me back. But if you should look at all of these is actually what if we should plug, we can, this, no, this, if you should plug this in order to work this out, this is actually calculating what we call interest. This is what you call calculating interest, and so simple interest is just an easy way of calculating interest for year after year after year, or year by year. So we're actually looking at simple interest. It's a very simple way. So we could just work this out in our heads. We could just say, okay, let's say if the bank is actually, if I borrowed $1,000 from the bank, and the bank says, all right, I borrowed $1,000 from the bank, let's see how much money, how much interest will I be paying back. So I borrow $1,000, and the bank says, okay, you're paying 5% for 2 years. I could say, okay, let me see what would be 5% of $1,000. What would be 5% of $1,000? Cancel the zero, cancel that zero. So it's a 5 times 10 gives us $50. And I am actually paying this for how many years? 2 years, year after year. So this will give me $100. So I will be paying an interest of $100. That's just working it out in your head. But just every year I'm paying $100. Every year, well, not every year. This is just for 2 years. So every year I'll be paying $50 because this is what I am paying 2 years for. So for 2 years I'm paying 100. So that simply means if I'm paying what would be my interest each year, I could just divide this 100 by 2, which will bring me back to this for the first year. So my interest for the first year is 50. My interest for the second year is 100. My interest for the third year would be actually 3 times the 50, which is 150, and so on. So that's a simple interest in a way. But there's a formula that we use to calculate this simple interest. So we don't have to go through all of that if we're not that arithmetically inclined with numbers and all of that. So let us look at the formula. So the formula is actually interest is equal to the P, which is, let's go back to this. Let's try to understand something. So what we're actually getting from this, let us try to highlight each variable in this. So this $1,000 is what we call the principal. This is the money that you borrow from the bank. Now this 5% is what we call the interest rate that you're paying, because this is what calculates the interest over the year after year, because the interest is the rate is what tells us the sum of amount of money off the money that you borrow over a period of year. This is actually increasing by a scale, depending on how many years you're actually paying it for. And so this will actually be equal to, well, this is somewhat intuitively, it's supposed to be a simple intuition by just year. Year is going to be the time or the duration of how long you actually be paying this. And so we're actually seeing interest. All of these coming together, all of these come together is what gives us what we call the interest. So the interest is actually equal to the P, which stands for principal, the rate the R that stands for rate, because we had R for rate. So and the time is, so it's a time. So this is actually the formula to find the interest. We could actually use this to calculate what we just calculated by hand. we could say, okay, let us substitute the values for each of these. So the interest would be equal to the principal was $1,000 that you borrow, and the rate was what, 5%, because we could say 5% is what, 100 over 5, or we could actually convert this fraction into decimal. It doesn't make any difference because it's just an equivalent substitution for it. So we could say, and the time is what, 2 years, 2 years. So we could actually plug this into the calculator. And if we plug this into the calculator, we will actually get, let's see, if you should multiply, if you should multiply, this gives it 2,000, and if you should find 2,000 of 0.05, that will give you exactly $100. And so the interest is actually be $100 interest. And so that's simply for simple interest. It doesn't matter how you look at it, it'll be the same way. That will be the same way. It'll be the same. This is a simple interest in a nutshell. But sometimes they ask you to find the principal, or to find the rate, or to find the time. And to find the time, and so on. So we can actually see. We can actually calculate time rate, principal individually. And the formula for these is actually what? Is actually interest times 100 divided by everything except the principal would be R times T. And we'll do the same thing if we want to find the formula for the interest. It actually be the interest times 100 times everything except the R. So it'll be principal times T. And if we were to find to actually come up with a formula for time, which will be basically the same thing that we are actually having in the repeat, and everything except the T. So it doesn't matter which one you want to write first, whether P or R in the formula, because R times P is equal to P times R. It is the laws of the commutative property actually dictates that to us. So if we were to find the principal, the rate, or the time, now this will be the actual formula to find them. So this is a simple interest in a nutshell. And just as how we would have actually substitute these values into the formula to evaluate for what would be the interest, it will be the same thing if we were to find the principal, the time, or the interest. But I will actually do some of these examples in another video. So there you go. Simple interest, calculating interest in an easy way, year by year.